I'm originally from North Carolina. I was born and raised there in a town called Burlington, North Carolina. As I was growing up, I loved sports. I particularly loved football and basketball, and I played both. I went to college on a football scholarship and played for 4 years. It was more important to me than any sort of career in law or college was to be able to play football. And I had injured myself in my senior year of high school that resulted in limitation scholarship opportunities. But I had one, and I took it and played and had success with it. And went through my 12 years of basic schooling and then college at a small college there named Catawba College. And after that, I went to law school at Tulane University in New Orleans. Going to New Orleans was the closest I could come to going to a foreign country without leaving the country. And so that was very attractive to me, and it ended up being a really good decision. In college, I was taking a political science course. I think the first semester of my second year, and taking a constitutional law, from a political science perspective, not a legal perspective. And it really, I absolutely was, probably to this day, it was the most interesting and exciting thing I ever encountered on an initial encounter, because I just loved reading the common law cases. I love the language. I like the concepts of balancing the interest of the state versus the interest of the individual, and what really is freedom and free speech. All of those things just appealed to me. I love the language that the justices and judges, whether it was John Marshall in Marbury versus Madison, or Justice Douglas, or Learned Hand, or Brandeis, or whoever. I just loved it. And it lit my fire, not so much to be a lawyer, but it lit my fire to be, to read more cases, really. And to think about the things that were discussed in those constitutional law cases. I really had fallen in love with everything in Louisiana, from the food to the people, and I didn't want to leave, and so I didn't. I had a friend in law school, Dan Carnes, who graduated we graduated together, and he was from West Monroe, Louisiana, and he was not going back to the area. He was going to D.C., where he was going to work for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. He urged me to go up there and check it out, because we were both interested in civil liberties type work. We wanted to do what we could to help change a fairly difficult situation that existed in 1970 when I left Tulane. The attorney I went to work with up there, who was doing a significant part of civil liberties litigation, was involved in a series of cases in a northern parish where there had been some extreme racial uprisings and disturbances. There were a whole series of criminal trials of African American, mostly soldiers, who had come back from Vietnam and wanted to change things in their community where they felt like they had been victimized. The first one that came up, I was supposed to sit second chair to assist the lawyer that was older than I was in trying the case. Something happened so that he couldn't make it. I'd only been practicing law a few weeks, and I ended up having to try the case. The system was not very sympathetic to our side of the case, and so the continuance was denied, and it went to trial, with me there having only seen one criminal trial in my life, and that was a barroom shooting. And so we went to trial, and then by some virtual miracle, there was a not guilty verdict. And of course that further stimulated me to enjoy the sweet nectar of victory yet again, along with the fact that I was doing some stuff that I like doing. From there on, I was thrown in. I was arguing cases in the United States Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals when I only been practicing about 6 months. I tried as half of those 11 cases in a row by myself, and it was it was an incredible experience. I was handling writs to the U.S. Supreme Court and doing all sorts of things in very rapid fire. It was exhausting, but at the same time exhilarating. So we did reapportionment cases on a volume that I would have never dreamed you could do. One of them, the school board and police jury of a particular parish refused to submit a plan after the court said, look, you're obviously malapportioned, submit a plan. And so this other lawyer and I obtained all of the census data, went through all of it the night before the trial when we found out that was the way it was going to be. And we drew a plan. The school board and police jury took the position that we're not going to submit a plan because we think what we have is constitutional. And our plan was adopted. The federal judge said, there's no other real way to go. This is what y'all have got. The deviations are appropriate. And that's the plan now. I would say that, in fact, the greatest thing about whatever my practice was or became was that it was so varied. And a lot of people would think it was too varied because even back then, it was the days of specialization. And it may have been, but for me it was wonderful because I was able to do everything from starting out with civil liberties litigation, tried a lot of criminal cases, tried drug cases, and from that I became very involved with personal injury and wrongful death cases. I had a great run of cases doing that and a great run of people that I met and was able to assist. Later evolved into doing a great number of unfair trade practice cases between businesses fighting over each other, with each other about what one or the other had done that supposedly hurt them. Finally ended up the last 10 years or so doing a lot of domestic relations case, family law, particularly including pretty complicated either custody cases or community property cases. I was really involved with attempting to get more attorneys to represent the underserved communities, indigents, in both civil and criminal areas. When I first arrived in Monroe, we started an organization called the Human Relations Council, which was really a biracial organization to try to just get some communication going and some sort of trust going between the races. And so it was black and white people. Some were professionals like lawyers, others were social workers, others were school teachers, all sorts of people that we would meet once a month, have talks about issues and problems. And from that we started a volunteer pro bono program whereby we would provide lawyers one day every other 2 weeks to be at a poverty agency there in Monroe to see people, to assist them with their legal problems as far as being able to at least counsel with them. Later we were able to, when the federal funding of legal aid became more available, we were able to put together a corporation, North Louisiana Legal Assistance Corporation. I think I served as the president of that for 8 or 9 years. And we got funding, and then a whole bunch of attorneys came to the area who were able to perform legal services for people who otherwise would not have any representation, everything from rent disputes to domestic cases. One lawyer whose relationship meant a great deal to me at the time was Gilbert Brown, who was an assistant district attorney in Ouachita Parish, was blind, legally blind, but a lot of people referred to him as UNIVAC because he had a memory that was locked in. It was like he'd get it, he had it. So you could ask him about the history of the law concerning mobile homes, and he could tell you from the first time there was a law concerning mobile homes what they became. He did try cases, but he didn't try that many cases, but he was simply knowledgeable about the law and about people. And if there was one person that I counseled with on a level as we were growing the firm and as I was going through all these different areas of law I practiced with, and eventually we hired him to work in our law firm. I was involved with the indigent defender system in criminal law in that the Supreme Court named me to the first Indigent Defender Board, along with a whole group of other lawyers, to deal with what they perceived to be a crisis in the criminal processes because there were not sufficient lawyers to represent persons accused of crimes who couldn't afford to hire somebody to assist them. I represented some children, a group of children, 5 kids, the oldest one 6 years old, whose mother was killed in a car wreck, and their father had trouble adjusting to the fact that the mother was killed, and eventually he was out of the picture and died not that long thereafter. And we were able to go to court, and we argued that her services as an unemployed housewife were far different than what had previously been awarded in loss of mothers who didn't work outside the home. It was usually loss of income. In this instance, we went through and showed what this mother would have done to do at each level when there are 5 little kids not going to school, when there's 4, when there's 3, when there's 2, when they're in grade school, when they're in junior high, high school, and what just the value of her services would be for each of those levels for the 5 kids. And a professor that I had in law school, Tom Andre, had written a book on wrongful death cases, and he mentioned that case. I was very proud of that. But more than that, I was proud of achieving what we were able to achieve for those kids who are friends of mine to this day. Represented a North Louisiana person who was a chicken farmer, and he needed some additional labor, and he had traveled down to South Texas and had brought back some Mexican illegal immigrants that he had brought back to work with him on the farm. Disputes arose. Other things may have been involved, but eventually the accusation was made against him that he had imprisoned these people and prevented them from leaving, and had even chained them up there to the area, to the fences inside the chicken houses and such. And it was a terrible case, but it became famous really all over the world. On the newspaper Le Monde in Paris, there was a picture of this cage that he was accused of keeping them in. So I was not necessarily on the side of civil liberties in that case because I was representing the accused chicken farmer. But it was probably the most discussed worldwide case I ever had anything to do with. Well, it sounds like I'm somehow in the terrible business, but I did represent a prison warden in another parish, a rural parish, who was one of the nicest men I ever met. But at this prison farm, they had and had for decades a structure identified as a hothouse, and they would, when a prisoner would misbehave in a particular extent, they would put him in this hothouse that was poorly ventilated and very uncomfortable to be in. This, for various reasons I won't go into now, a couple of their inmates were, upon coming back from furlough, were deemed to be a hazard. They put them in the hothouse, and I think both of them died from heat exhaustion. And so then the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division in Washington filed, got criminal indictment of the prison warden, and we represented him in federal court in a fairly significant trial, and fortunately the jury found him not guilty. We did represent the Association of Retarded Citizens in Ouachita Parish because there was steps taken in a community in the area to deny a group home status to a group of retarded citizens, totally nonviolent, all of these things, certified by everybody, but they would not let them have that. And they said, you can only have this if you're a single family, and we were able to get the law to agree that a group of retarded citizens living in a family home, in a group home, was a family, and therefore they had to issue the approval for them to be there. Oh yes, I did find it incredibly satisfying to be a lawyer in many different ways. I also, if I lost something, I almost died, and that was not satisfying. But and I did lose things, and I would be pretty well crushed by it. But the highs were so great from winning the case or the cause, or getting the result, or being satisfied that some judges or groups of judges saw your analysis as being the correct one, or a jury agreed with you and said, that's right, there's liability here. And those things are such highs. It's hard for me to think that many people in this world get to enjoy those highs. Or if I gave any thought to what I'd like to be remembered for, I think it would be my goal. I used to express my goal was to be what I considered to be a lawyer's lawyer. Now that may be unique to my definition of what that is, but that was my goal then, and I'd like to be remembered for having been that. I'd be very proud of that. And by that I mean one who does it right and does it well.